Hi everyone. We'll start off this lesson with the vertical angles theorem. And if you look at this diagram, 1 and 3 are vertical angles and 2 and 4 are vertical angles. So according to the vertical angles theorem, angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And that's because of the vertical angles theorem. Alright, now let's use the vertical angles theorem to find x. Let's say we have these two angles. This one is represented by 3x plus 4 degrees, and this one is 7x degrees. And we know that they're vertical angles, so therefore we can set up this equation. 3x plus 4 is equal to 7x, and now we can solve for x by subtracting 3x to both sides, and that'll get us 4 on the left hand side and 4x on the right hand side. So therefore x is equal to 1 if you were to divide both sides by 4. Now once we know that x is equal to 1, we can plug it back into the 7x, and that'll give us 7, and we'll plug it back into the 3x plus 4, and that also gives us 7. So x is equal to 1. Alright, let's use the vertical angles theorem to do a proof. Let's say we have this diagram, and it's given that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4, and we want to prove that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. So here's my two-column proof. The statements are on the left, the reasons are on the right, and we always start off with the given. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 4, and that's given. The next statement that we want to write down is that angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. So 2 is congruent to 4. And the justification for that is because of the vertical angles theorem. Now, in order to write the next statement, if we look at the previous two statements, we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, right? Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because of the transitive property of congruence. So the next statement that we want to write down is to relate angles 1 and 3. And we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because of the vertical angles theorem. Now, if we were to check out the previous two statements, we can write down the last statement concerning angles 2 and angle 3. From here, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, which is the last statement here. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and that is because of the transitive property of congruence. Since this is what we want to prove, that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and it matches with our last statement, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and we have a justification for it, then our proof is done. Alright, let's take a look at the congruent supplements theorem, which the vertical angles theorem was derived from. If angles 1 and 3 are supplements, and angles 2 and 3 are also supplements, and that indicates that both angles 1 and 2 are supplements of the same angle 3, then you can conclude that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Now, if we were to change the word supplements to complements, all three here, then we end up with the same conclusion, which is if you have two angles that are the complements of the same angle, then those two angles are congruent to each other. Alright, so now let's take a look at two related theorems. The first one is all right angles are congruent. And the second one is if you have two angles that are congruent and supplementary, then they are right angles. Okay? And we're done, and we're happy.